This episode of Sewing Out Loud is brought to you by My Girlfriend's Quilt Shop. Stay tuned to learn how to get a $25 online gift card to mygirlfriendsquiltshop.com.
Welcome to Sewing Out Loud, the official podcast of Zede Sewing Studio. Here are your hosts, Zede and Mallory.
Sewing Out Loud. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Mallory Donahue.
And I'm Zede Donahue.
And today we're talking about Mom's Ariel costumes.
Yes.
That she made. I know we've been pretty costume heavy these past couple of months,
but that is our life.
And costumes really offer so many opportunities to challenge yourself. Right?
Yeah, well, yes. And if we're supposed to podcast about what we know, I sure have done a lot of costumes.
Yeah, and costumes mean that you work with stuff like faux fur and spray glue and what, you know, lycra and this and that and the other thing. So we just work with all sorts of
right and
crazy stuff.
You know,
so
costumes can also have sort of category specific
Sure.
too. You can have dance costumes. You can have stage costumes. Aerial costumes have their own particular things that, you know, you want and don't want in them.
So
skating costumes, gymnastic costumes. What's the rhythmical gymnastics?
Yes.
And sometimes things are also dictated by sort of their tradition or what is expected, like in a competition maybe.
Yeah, it's pretty neat to explore the traditional aspects.
Let's not forget ballroom costumes.
Yeah,
yes.
the traditional aspects of costuming I think are really neat. It's like any other art form. It's a record, you know, of
while we're here,
what society,
do you know what the term drag, where did that came from?
No.
You don't.
Tell me, Mom.
In Shakespearean plays, the customer may write in the margin D-R-A-G, dressed as a girl, because there were no female actresses.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Or actors or actors.
Right. They didn't allow females on stage at that point.
Right.
Cool.
So it's, dressed as girl.
It was just shorthand.
Right. Somehow it got to drag.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's neat. I didn't know that. And okay, you know, we've done drag costuming too.
Yes,
and
we
that
have.
can include its own, you know, specific challenges and stuff. So that's also, and there are, you know, a lot of the drag performers actually do a lot of their own costuming.
They get very involved because
personal.
Well, I think because it's personal, I think it's part of what they enjoy.
Yeah, it's
whole
thing.
My big drag exposure was with Athena, and she, depending on whether she's Jeff or Athena.
Jeff or Athena, yeah.
Yes, I call her however she's dressed is what I say. Has very much got into it with me, and I started coaching her, and other people were coaching her
on making that
and
costume.
Actually, Jeff became the manager of an alterations store for years, and of course he learned a lot there from everybody involved in that.
On RuPaul's Drag Race, I feel like there's always one or two contestants who are like, you know, this is what I do to kind of support my, you know, self, or, you know, I make my own costumes, and I always love to see that because it just excites me because I like to sew too. All right, so we're talking about Ariel costumes today, and you had to make 3 Ariel costumes for Showcase.
Yes, and had, I don't know if that's the right verb or not, but I made it where I had to.
You made it where you had to?
Yes.
Yeah, Mom came to me and she said, Mallory, you know how you used to volunteer me to sew costumes for your friends, you know, on Halloween or on, you know, for shows or whatever.
Right.
And I was like, yeah. She's like, well, my friend wants us to make her an Ariel costume.
And Mallory's like, oh, sure.
Okay.
And then Mallory goes and she tries out for a play, and she makes it. And then
I just want to say
she's
that
in the play, and then
sometimes
she makes 200 meat pie things, and she was not any help with my Ariel. She was very little help. You made one applique, I think. You drew one applique.
I tried to sew on some appliques, and you criticized me, and I was like, all right, I'll just let you sew on the appliques. I told one of your performance buddies this. I was like,
you did?
Yeah, Zede told me that she wanted me to help her, so I started sewing on. So she was like, well, I don't actually like it this way. I was like, okay. I'll let you do this. So anyway, I sewed on.
Very little help. And then she starts sewing Halloween costumes.
Yes. So anyway, Ariel costumes, tell us a bit about the design process after you adjust your chair.
That was that thunk. I had to put my chair up, guys.
Tell us about your design process and tell us about the requirements, like you were kind of saying, of an Ariel costume. And you know what? Aerial arts. Let's define it. Working with silks. Either two silks
aerial
or a
arts,
hammock.
I don't know the true description, but
Yeah,
aerial arts is when you're up in the air and you're hanging from something that's hanging from the ceiling.
So your costumes were for people who were working on the silks.
We were actually
the
on the silks and the hammock, which is the fabrics that you see. So silks is the two tails you see hanging from the ceiling, and the hammock is where each end of the fabric. Now, they call them silks, and what they really are is they're tricot.
Yeah, it's really cool.
They're nylon tricot. But I guess that's, first of all, a lot of people say tricot, too, just so y'all know.
Tricot.
It's tricot. But they call them silks, I guess, because it sounds much more romantic than tricot.
Than
tricot.
Nylon knit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what we're working with. So you have to use these silks to wrap around your body,
right?
To hang, to drop,
right.
To make shapes in the air.
That's right.
So how
a lot of people call it dancing in the air, or that type of thing.
How did that influence the shape, the structure of the costume?
Well, for one thing, you don't want to damage the silks.
Okay.
Right? So most likely the absence of zippers, or the zippers need to be very well, covered.
Enclosed.
Okay, right.
Absence of zippers.
Last night we had somebody wear a Halloween costume to aerial practice, and she put tape on her zipper.
That's funny.
Pretty funny. Cute idea. So, for instance, rhinestones. If you want rhinestones on the costume, they must be glued on and have no sharp edges.
So no metal casing sort of thing around the rhinestone.
Right. And then sequins, really need to be sort of flat. You don't want these things to be caught. And this is also out of respect to the next person
who's using the same
who's using it. So also even things like if you had a costume that shed excessively, like feathers or glitter, so you have to think about what's going to happen with that fabric. Now, the other thing, too, is you don't want your costume getting caught in the fabric.
Sure, yeah. Close fitting?
Yes.
Second skin,
people,
sort of?
Right, and people have often, usually you can get by with a small ruffle.
Okay.
Or a very short skirt that's close fitting to the body. But you don't want anything that basically can get, entangled within the silk, or you get stuck, or I've seen people's
costumes rip off.
I've never seen a costume get ripped off, but in practice, people have lost their shirts. The shirt's shirt's been ripped in half, or the shirt's got wound up, or we've had to untangle someone because their shirt was, So that's one reason you don't practice the silks particularly by yourself, because things can happen. It's not just falling. It could be twisted up within your clothing.
So you could be like James Franco in that movie where he has to saw off his own arm or something.
Yeah. You have to not, it's like Two Coyote, you have to saw off this, chew off this arm to get out of it. But yeah. So, it's not safe to do some of those things.
So you're not going to find fringe or flowy.
No, you're really not. And appliques will be, pretty flat.
Okay.
So that, according to that is how I actually picked out what I
so you decided
made the costume from.
On all three of these costumes to include, I think a pretty common feature, which is some nude mesh.
I did.
Mesh to match the skin tone of the person who's wearing it. So it sort of looks like they're wearing a costume that's kind of like just laying on their body.
Right. And so if you want a
could look strapless.
Right. And, I mean, it's hard to wear a strapless costume and expect it to stay in place on the silks. You're upside down. I know when I go upside down, like my bosoms, go under my chin.
This skin-colored mesh creates shapes that would be impossible to actually wear.
For instance, Jen's had a very plunging neckline, almost to her navel. It was a big V. And you can't really, body tape's not going to keep that on. Like, somebody who's walking in a dress on the red carpet or something. It needs to be held together on your body.
So you made a costume for Jen.
Yes.
And Jen was like... a combination of a couple.
Yeah, well, Jen was like, I ordered something from dance ... place,
right.
and it was just terrible and didn't fit me, and and I'm sure it didn't. She has very tiny limbs, like thin limbs.
She's very slender limbs.
She has tiny little bones, and I could have altered something for her too, but sometimes the dance costumes are not of the quality they need to be for something like this.
Yeah.
This is more in the realm of gymnastics.
It's something that you could get away with.
It's a sport.
Yeah.
Too.
Something maybe you could get away with in a different context. So Jen was...
Or one perform... Even with like my leggings and my leotards that I wear, I can see where they wear out from the friction of the silk.
It's kind of hard on them.
Right.
So she had this black and red sort of like Harlequin looking.
She picked, if anybody knows who Harley Quinn is, it was the old traditional Harley Quinn. She had a picture of Harley Quinn, which is a Harlequin type outfit.
Yeah, so old Harley Quinn, but then of course there's the even older Harlequin, like character.
Like Harley Quinn's name comes from Harlequin.
I think that Harlequin is like from the Commedia dell'arte or something like that.
Right, I think of it like a court gesture.
It's really old. Yeah,
right.
And so this is swapping colors every.
Right, so it's very color blocked.
Yes,
the top is red, and then the opposite leg is red, and then the other sleeve is red. Black. So she was black. She had this black and red picture of Harley Quinn. Okay, because I told her to draw me a picture. She says, I don't draw.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and then she had a true Ariel costume. Okay, that picture of a woman, on silks, where the back and sides were sort of, cut out. It was obvious that they were meshed there. And then she had more of a capri length to her leg. These were, I should add, wound up that I made unitards.
Yeah, they're being unitards.
So it was sort of a capri length leg, and then I guess it's a 3/4 length sleeve. It just came past her elbow, sort of, and mesh was after that, actually.
Okay, so then let's just talk about real quick the design of yours and Lacey's, because they were sort of similar.
Okay. Well, I guess what I should say with Jen's is, so what I said to her, she said, now Jen is from Thailand.
Right.
So sometimes I get scared if I don't understand.
English is not her first language.
Right. So sometimes we use words a little bit differently, and we kind of laugh when we do. So I said, I will draw a picture and send and show it to you.
Yes.
Because I don't want to make her something that she's extremely disappointed in. I don't want to put the time into
a good idea.
it. Right?
Yeah.
So I did the sketch and gave it back to her, and she was thrilled.
Shoot, even when English is your shared mother tongue, communication about costumes can be
and that's
tricky.
True, because people don't even know the language of garments.
And sometimes, certain things can mean different things to different people, but good idea drawing a picture. Okay, let's talk about yours and Lacey's, and then I want to come back to the mesh and how you how you meshed the mesh and the design and everything.
Mesh.
So you and Lacey, you were in black velvet.
Black velvet. And it was actually
stretchy velvet.
It was actually some that I had here in stock.
How old do you think that velvet is?
Well, when were you in acro? Because I think it was from that.
Oh, okay. So I was like age,
20 years ago,
to 12. Yeah,
right.
20 years ago.
So it was 18, 20-year-old stretch velvet.
And actually, at one point, Mom got out this velvet and she's like, what? I can't make our costumes out of this. I only have 2 yards of this here. And I was like, oh, no, Mom, there's the bolt over there. She's like, okay.
So that was the end of one bolt.
Right.
And there was a whole other bolt with like 15 yards on it.
There's a whole bolt of black stretch velvet, which comes in handy.
We have used it quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes. So black stretch velvet.
Right.
And then you had your mesh insets, and they were much more fluid than Jen's. Jen's was
very color
angular.
Blocked.
Yeah.
And like where you would almost expect a seam to be most of the time. Right.
Sure.
Ours were much more fluid and I guess that's right, like a flowy shape. And I wanted a low back, and I also wanted to split down the front. And I wanted one arm to be flesh tone and one arm to be the velvet.
It was then like also asymmetrical.
It was asymmetrical
and fluid.
Yes. And what was funny is I flipped us. I don't know if you noticed, but we were mirror images.
Yes.
So and then one leg was cut out all the way up like to the hip, which was mesh also, which appeared to be a skin tone.
And Jen's, like the mesh and the black and the red lycra, they would meet, like you said, where a seam was. You covered your meetings of mesh and velvet with the appliques.
I did. I actually made like a bodysuit. Well, I would say more like a leotard without a crotch is what I made.
Exactly. So the shape was different, and you didn't want to see that line between mesh and black. It was all covered with metallic.
I did cover that with appliques. No, it wouldn't have had to have been.
Yeah,
it looked fine without it. That was just sort of what I chose. But
really neat difference. I think
most of the velvet was appliqued onto a mesh bodysuit. Right.
Okay, let's talk about skin color real quick before we take a break.
Oh, yeah, and this was a big challenge.
So, like you said, Jen's from Thailand.
Right.
And she is, I don't know, like...
She says to me, "You're very white."
Yeah. Mom has some of the palest skin.
I'm like white pink.
Yeah, she's like translucent.
Like anytime those foundation colors and they go, this is the palest pale. I'm that. I have the skin of like maybe like a ginger person, a redheaded person. Except I have black hair.
And then and I'm kind of medium. I have more olive undertones.
Yeah, you've got olive in you.
Than you do. And then Jen has like a darker skin, and she has more like yellowish undertones.
She had almost a green. Yeah.
The olive yellow.
The olivey green. Yeah.
When I first encountered people, I'm like, oh, you have red undertones.
Right.
You have, green undertones. Like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, they don't believe it.
And it really is true. Like, when you start to look at how people's, it's just very interesting. So now I thought what was kind of nice is she had face makeup on.
Yeah, she had a face.
So it was kind of cool that you didn't have to perfectly match,
actually,
but,
it was so freaking close.
Hers was closer than yours.
Hers was closer than mine.
Yeah.
So the mesh I had, which is sort of like this, it is the most disgusting skin tone on earth.
Well, don't say that because we sell it. It's called.
Well, no,
it's called toast.
It's called toast, and I guess first of all, your skin tone isn't a flat color.
Right.
So, this stuff is flat.
It's very flat.
It
does look yellowy.
It is. I believe it's yellowy. I think I could use some more pink in it for me.
Pinky,
I think I could like pink wash it for me.
But we have this bolt and we sell this power shaper net. So what'd you do?
So that's what I used. And the first thing I did is I didn't think the mesh was going to work on Jen, and I took a piece and laid it on her skin, and it was like, it was like me laying my arm next to
Jen's,
hers.
and it was not going to work.
We're two obviously different colors, and so I decided I was going to have to dye.
Yeah,
her mesh,
and
because I actually looked to see if I could even find a mesh that I thought would even approach her skin tone, and I couldn't.
It just didn't look satisfactory.
None of the sample things that we had could I find anything. And of course, you can't just look on the internet for a skin tone.
And this is a complaint for a lot of people, and especially people who have darker skin colors, that they can't find like a lot of lingerie or other garments, like maybe hosiery or something, like in their colors, you know?
Well, I've never found anything in my color either, but, you know, I mean, I think they tend to make it a lighter
color. You see a
color,
lot more peach tone.
Which, if you realize you can dye it, kind of makes sense.
So, yeah, talk about dyeing.
Because I have done this before. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember Crazy for You,
yeah,
but I dyed like I wound up having like 5 different colors of mesh for those girls. Right.
So if you really need to, no matter what you're doing, you need to remember that you can dye stuff, everybody.
Well, and you also need to really look at the person's skin tone. Like if you looked at Jen and I across the room from each other, mm-hmm. I don't think you'd realize how many shades were in between us.
Right.
You know, it's just amazing. You know, right. It's like we're 2 different crayons on the opposite ends of the box or whatever.
Absolutely.
So I did dye it, and I actually just used Rit dye because the content of the mesh is basically poly and spandex, or nylon. I'm sorry, nylon and spandex.
Okay, and Rit dye, tell us a little bit more about Rit dye.
I hope this is still true, because when I researched it, it was like 20 years ago, okay? But Rit dye has a combination of dyes.
Like lots of different dyes in it.
Right, so that no matter what your fiber content is, it will dye it. Now, it won't guarantee a color or an intensity.
Yeah.
But it will dye it.
It will change the color of it.
So I can dye cotton with it, or I can dye polyester with it. I can dye silk with it. I can, dye rayon. I can dye a poly blend or a cotton blend with it, and I will get color.
Something is going to happen to it.
Right.
I dyed tights for someone in the sink at high school because they were supposed to be Peter Pan for a class, and she forgot to dye her tights. And I was like, we can just do that in the sink, and it won't color your porcelain sink, right? Didn't at Rockbridge High School.
And you should be able, you should be able to, like, on something like that that's fairly non-porous, basically take Clorox or something or bleach and get it out.
And okay, so you dyed to match Jen's skin tone.
I did, and this is, you have to realize, I took one of our fabric swatch things and I tried to match her skin as best. Like, I figured I was only going to get close anyway.
Right.
And I put a little bit of brown in. Now, I literally did this, like, in a cup.
Right.
Okay. I put a little bit of brown in. I put a little bit of red in. I was like, nope, shouldn't have put that red in. So I put some yellow in. And I think that's what I did. I put some yellow in. And then I decided I got it too yellow, so I put some orange in. I have no idea what this formula was. And then I took it out, okay, and I actually just kind of put it on my skin, if you really want to know the truth. I put it in the palm of my hand, and where it was sort of translucent, and I could see it, and I thought, I'm going for this. Now, the thing with dyeing is, I didn't have a lot of time to do this. You'll never match it again.
Right.
You'll never be exact. So I made sure I dyed enough. And since I didn't know my formula. Now, I did keep a jar of the original mixture that I made in case something happened and I had to try a match or something. But I went ahead and I dyed 2 yards because I thought I needed 1. Mm-hmm. Okay. And, of course, it's a different color when it's wet and it's a different color when it's dry. I also use a pre-treatment called Synthropol, which is like a detergent. And it takes out all of the free dye out of the existing fabric and any finishes or anything that might be on it. Then I dye it. And then I, again, use the Synthropol, which takes any free dye out so it won't. Okay. I did this all in a bucket. Okay. With hot water from the tap. Was as hot as I went. And that mesh took that color. Bam.
Okay. And I want to say that we were a really good influence on someone with this whole dyeing thing.
Oh, really?
Because we discussed it in earlier podcasts, right? So Heather emails us and says that she responded to our newsletter. She said she loved seeing the Cars costumes that I made. And then she said, last night I dyed fabric for the first time. I got the inspiration from the show costuming series on the podcast. It's for a holiday exhibition skating dress. I'm on a deadline and not too familiar with ordering that type of fabric. So I stopped by our local and well-stocked Joann. I picked up green and gold fabric and white power mesh and thought, oh, I can just dye this white mesh to be green. Having never done that before. As I stood stirring over the stove last night, I thought, quote, I'm dying over here and it's all Zede and Mallory's fault.
I'm dying.
Love the podcast. I had no one in my life growing up who sews, so I learned so much about what I don't know from your broadcast. Thanks for all you do. And then she sent a picture and she dyed this fabric. She just go for it, everybody.
Yeah.
If you can't find the exact color you want, just get to dyeing and mixing.
Well, I'm telling you, it was so close to her skin color. It was
pretty fantastic.
And here's the other thing about skin color. Your arms are a different color than your neck, or your face or your legs.
It doesn't have to be super close.
It doesn't have to be super close, especially, when you're on stage. You're not, and it obviously gives an illusion
when
of
you're
being,
on stage and you are in the lights and all that jazz. Yeah.
Right. So her mesh looked much better than
yours.
Than mine and Lacey's because I dyed hers to
let's
match her.
Take a quick break for a message break from our sponsor. We will be right back.
This week's Sewing Out Loud podcast is brought to you by My Girlfriend's Quilt Shop. You know we love the quality of Baby Lock sewing machines, and now their genuine collection sewing machines are available for purchase online. That's right. No matter where you are located, Baby Lock quality is at your fingertips.
The perfect gift for the maker in your life, the Genuine Collection includes an affordable range of machines that are great for travel or for the creative person who wants to explore sewing. Machines start at just $150 and ship for free.
Listeners to Sewing Out Loud will receive a $25 online gift card to My Girlfriend's Quilt Shop with the purchase of a Genuine Collection machine. Use it on sewing supplies, patterns, or notions for yourself or someone you love.
Visit mygirlfriendsquiltshop.com/podcast. That's mygirlfriendsquiltshop, shop with 2 P's and an E, .com/podcast to browse the Genuine Collection. And even if you don't need a machine, get a free pattern for a fabulous zippered pouch when you visit mygirlfriendsquiltshop.com/podcast.
Thanks, My Girlfriend's Quilt Shop.
Sewing Out Loud. And we're back.
Okay, and I'm going to say one other thing about mesh. Is it can also be used to impart color instead of match color.
Okay.
I can't remember if it was you. I think it was. And you said, we were watching Wicked, I believe. We were at Wicked. And you said, how do they get all of her skin to be green? The only makeup that was green on her was her face and her hands.
Right.
And they put had a green mesh over her skin. And it doesn't come off. You don't have to worry about the makeup. So they then match her green makeup to the green mesh that's within. Right. So she's wearing like probably a bodysuit or something, under another costume that's green mesh.
Yeah. That's a really good point. So talk about closures a little bit. You mentioned that you couldn't have like zippers.
Right.
Wouldn't be a great idea.
Right.
Tell us how these unitards.
Well, with the unitard, you can, it has to go on like a leotard. You have to step into it.
Feet first, yeah.
It comes up over your body. So your neck hole is your entrance.
Right.
Right? And your neck hole doesn't just have to go over your head. It has to go over your hips, your waist, your bosoms,
butt, you
whatever.
You got to get your arms in there.
Your entire body has to go through, the neck. So in a leotard, a lot of times you'll see like a scoop neck or something, and of course you have spandex involved.
Right.
It's usually a knit fabric with some spandex or elastane or whatever we want to call it, lycra. And so it does have some movement. and some recovery.
Right.
So, if your hips are 40, maybe the neck hole doesn't have to be 40. Maybe it only has to be 34, and it'll return to it.
But your costumes were high-necked.
But our costumes were high-necked partially because of the mesh.
The embellishment.
Right, and how we wanted it to look. And I wanted the mesh to cover most of the skin again, too, because that gave you a certain color. So what we had a keyhole opening in the back. And you'll see this in a lot of high-necked leotards, okay? Or like a turtleneck leotard or one that they want to... So they just put a keyhole in the back, and then maybe they have a hook or a snap. And when I say a snap, I don't mean like a little baby snap.
Yeah.
I mean like... a riveted in snap.
Hammered in
snap.
Yes.
And a lot of times there'll be even something else to secure that, like a piece of elastic underneath that has a hook and eye to it or something, so that there's not too much strain on it, or so that it doesn't pop, or that if it does pop open, it doesn't come down. Right. So I used a bra hook on ours.
Okay.
A tiny, tiny bra hook and a tiny piece of elastic.
Oh, neat.
And, it was just at the top of the keyhole opening. Ours was mesh, too. Lacey's and mine. On Jen's, hers was actually her fabric and not the mesh. So I just left her back seam open.
Right.
Whatever it was, 8 inches or 6 inches or something. And then she had a huge hook and eye at the top, like a coat, if anybody's familiar with what a coat hook and eye would be.
Right. So Jen's mesh to fabric transitions, were they mostly seams?
They were seams. Everything on hers was a seam except those appliques that you had drawn.
Yeah. Okay. Tell us, though, this is what I want to talk about. Now, if you are a Zigzag member of SoCure.com, you got a very in-depth live broadcast about how Zede applied appliques to these costumes, which actually I also used on the cards. I ended up being very grateful that you had done all this experimentation.
Actually, I kind of wound up using some of that technique on Wonder Woman's cape, too.
Yeah,
so
I put her if you're interested in how those appliques go on, you can go back and watch that live broadcast. It's in the Facebook group. You can join SoCure.com at SoCure.com/membership. But tell us about the construction process between the mesh and the velvet on yours and Lacey's, because it was not quite as straightforward as just seaming together.
No. Well, like I said, there was a bodysuit, basically, of mesh.
So did you make like an entire mesh bodysuit?
Yeah, with that, like I said, without the crotch. I went down over the hips.
Down over the hips.
But no crotch. Okay. I didn't feel like we needed double crotch. I felt like that would have been uncomfortable because the crotch was all velvet.
Right. The crotch didn't have any skin tone inserts.
I pretty much covered the crotch area. Okay. As I told.
It was made of opaque fabric.
Yes, and I told Lacey we don't want the Vagina police called. Right, and I had to explain what the Vagina police was. So now she uses that term.
Maybe that information should only be for members, too.
You think so?
Yeah, we'll share that.
Okay. So anyway, I then, I had basically the pattern on tissue paper, and then I drew my shapes on the tissue paper so that I would know where these would go, and I would know what shape to cut my velvet.
Yes.
Okay.
So this was the pattern, the color blocking pattern of your leotard.
Right.
Okay.
So the front, actually, I cut the leg out. It was like the leg and a big piece that went up one side, sort of, and then over, So I did have like side seams of velvet, around the hips.
Yeah.
So that's how and hers, I actually, on the one side, predetermined where her cutout leg would be. And I actually did it differently on mine. Okay.
Yeah.
But, so this was like basically a series of drawings that I could lay on top of each other and then cut out the proper, piece of fabric.
Was the velvet always applied onto the mesh?
Yes, always.
Okay, so the velvet was always applied onto the mesh. And what stitch did you use to apply that?
I used just a zigzag. and burnished over the edge, and it was a fairly wide zigzag. I think we did like 3.5 in length,
and
maybe
like a 3 length,
and a 3 lengths.
3.5 width,
because I also wanted a good bite out of it. I must say, on that velvet, not a stitch showed.
Sure, it just kind of eats it up.
It went right in, right.
I want to say, too, the mesh that Zede used is this Power Shaper net, that we sell, and it is some sturdy stuff.
It's very sturdy, and that has actually come up, I believe, in our Facebook before, as people are like, oh, what do you use if you want to make a leotard or a skating outfit, costume, and you want this to look nude, and people are like, oh, there's this stuff called Illusion. Illusion is a very, very fine mesh. Sometimes it's just even made out of nylon. I don't even know how much spandex it has in it. Probably a little.
I believe there are some illusions, like bridal illusion, that have no spandex.
Right. They're almost like a tulle.
So careful.
Very, very careful where you go with this. Think about how you're applying this and to what type.
There are different.
What the usage is.
Like, not all sheer meshes are the same.
No,
there are different weights.
And we have this power mesh, which there are other meshes called power meshes, and that are not as heavy.
This is called Power Shaper net.
This is Power Shaper net. Right? There's a thing called Power Mesh.
There's like...
Okay, and every place is going to call it something different.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So you have to get a sample. You unless you have ordered it before and you have a piece in hand, you don't know how it works.
And that's why I thought it was neat that Heather, she felt she could go to the store, and what she really wanted was to be able to, like, feel.
Yes.
And she's like, okay, but I can make this green. I can buy it in this neutral color, and I can make it in the color I want. So that's an advantage of, being a little daring.
Well, and, I have often done that in costuming, but an entire bolt of something that was off-white or even a pale pink, and I knew I could dye it. We have a bolt of Osnaburg here, which is a cotton sort of rustic fabric. And, oh my gosh, I have dyed it and over-dyed it and all kinds of dyed it, distress dyed it, and made it into something. But I could almost dye something faster than I could go hunt for something the right color, or if I wanted an ombre, I could do that on it. So it's not uncommon for me to have that stock white or off-white
neutral
or something that I can dye.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about construction process with the sleeves these unitards for you and Lacey, they were 5 pieces, a front, 2 backs, 2 sleeves.
Yes,
is that how many
that's right.
pieces
There was a seam down the back.
Seam down the back, yeah. For your keyhole, for fitting.
Well, and the seam down the back, if you, especially because, and with that power mesh being as stiff as it was, I needed to be able to contour it at the back. So if you don't put a back seam in a garment, you don't, you definitely lose some fitting.
Right.
And I put a back seam in all my leotards.
Right.
I mean, everything has a back seam in it because most people's butt comes out and their back goes in. And
that's where you can do a sway back adjustment, people, when there's back seam.
There you go.
Okay,
that
anyway.
might be what it's for. Anyway.
So... with the sleeves, did you applique onto the sleeves while they were flat? Did you put the velvet and the appliques onto the sleeve while they were flat?
I did it while they were flat. And again, it was a series of, this is what the whole sleeve looks like, and this is what the piece that goes on top of it looks like. And I cut that piece that went on top of it.
So tell me what happened on the hands and the feet of these costumes.
Well...
back to our security issues
and this would be something, especially in gymnastics, rhythmical gymnastics. Well, even almost anything that would be like a sport,
right? And
sometimes in dance, you need to anchor these,
right?
Okay, the sleeve will go up, especially if you're doing something where you're stretching, you're tumbling, or reaching. That tight fitting lycra sleeve is not going to maybe stay at your wrist. So basically I made what I refer to it as a gauntlet sleeve.
Right.
Okay. And I don't know if y'all know what gauntlets are, but they're those gloves that don't have any fingers covered.
Right.
Right. So I make a gauntlet sleeve that sort of, there's a peak that comes down over the middle of the hand and a piece of elastic and or power mesh or whatever you want to put there that will go around the middle finger.
Right. So it kind of came to a V.
Yes.
So on your costume, one of those was black.
Right.
And one of them was mesh.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct.
And so hers looked like it had a 3/4 length sleeve, but there was mesh coming down over her hand into that gauntlet.
Because her 3/4 length sleeve's also going to pull up.
It would roll up for sure.
Right. And
I would think a long sleeve might have more of a chance of staying down.
I do too. And the thing is you're rubbing up against these silks. Well, and I guess the last thing you want, here you are, you've practiced this routine, you've put your life into this choreography, for several weeks, and then one sleeve's rolled up and one's down, and you're lopsided and you're not getting the shape and the look you want.
I think that it can also add to the line.
Well, that's it.
You're making.
I'm talking about shape.
Yeah, when you cut off, like on your black sleeve, if you were to just cut that off in a, what do I want to say? A line like just around the wrist. I think that narrowing, that continuing of that line.
I like it.
Can look nice. Yes.
And then at the foot.
Yeah.
Okay. You can do different. There's basically it was a stirrup setup. Now the way I did this is I just made a straight leg. And a small hole was cut, and that goes over your heel. Pops out of that,
goes into the hole.
Yeah, and that's what works. Now, you could also use a piece of elastic there, and just make a loop.
Right.
There's several things you can do. It's not uncommon to see this type of stirrup I made. It's not uncommon to see it in gymnastics or in the aerial performances. It's very, very common.
So once again on Jen's, hers, it looked like she was wearing like capri pants,
right?
Except
that
there
hers was mesh
down over the leg,
right.
And her pants kind of came to this point. Is what
in the front, the fabric, the opaque fabric came to
like kind of over her knee, and the way you could get that shape to stay like that was to have this mesh
and pull it down,
right. Stabilizing it or this mesh underneath, so you can create those neat shapes when you are applying onto the mesh. Now
I will say I appliqued that onto the mesh.
The leg.
I will tell you what I did. I tried it both ways. I mean, testing, right? And I did not like a seam being there.
Yeah.
I put it like on my leg, and I was like, no, we're better off just appliquing this onto the mesh. So I appliqued, basically that fabric that ended, below her knee. I appliqued it onto the mesh in that shape, and it gave a much better look. And fit, it was smoother.
Right. It was smoother. So when you were appliquing all this stuff, onto this fabric,
I was dreaming about it too. Go ahead.
Did you use any stabilizer underneath? Did you feel the need to at any time?
I was ready to, and I never needed it.
So I just want to say, if you have a machine that has a real strong motor,
right, you
might not need to do this. It will have that penetrating power. You want to use a new needle.
A good new needle. Good thread. Not Granny's thread that's off of the wooden spool.
Right. If you have a machine that's more entry level, stabilizer, tearaway, lightweight tearaway, like the Totally Stable from Sulky that I keep recommending. Actually, it's come up so many times. Right. It's an embroidery product and a crafting product, but it's really in garment sewing. I think it's so useful. It's super lightweight. It's going to give your machine something to kind of grip and sew onto. Especially if your machine is wanting to like drag knits down into, the bottom of it or something like that. That Totally Stable can be so helpful. And since it's thin, you're perforating it with this long, wide zigzag. It will come away very easily.
And you'll pull it away by holding your stitches and then pull it away. And the other thing I did do with all of the applique, even when it was a big piece, I used a spray adhesive.
Yeah.
I started out not using the spray adhesive. I pinned. And I was like, man, this is like really torture.
Yeah.
It worked. But I was like, oh my gosh, and I have to worry about like where everything is.
Okay.
And I got out the temporary embroidery spray adhesive, and I put it on and I loved myself for that idea.
Okay, if you want to see the details of Zede appliquing on these very complex shapes and doing just the most amazing job. Become a zigzag
Mallory
member.
likes my points.
No, I was
she likes how I stitch in my points.
She was stitching these points, and I was like, oh, man.
See, maybe that's why I turned my nose up.
Yeah, I know it's why. I know it's why. I was like, oh, I just don't care that much on my car's costumes. I was like, oh, my God.
You didn't have those kinds of points
No,
either.
I didn't. No. Oh, my. You should watch the video, watch the live broadcast if you're a Zigzag member. It is really quite impressive. So she goes through that spandex applique process. And this is a way to get color and shape onto a stretchy garment.
Well, and we haven't said this yet here, but I know we did in the broadcast. So I'm using 4-way stretch fabric.
Right.
Therefore, my applique fabric must be 4-way stretch if I want to maintain that same integrity of stretch.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. So I can't just applique with anything. It has to be, allow me to have the same stretch.
Yes. Okay, well, I think that pretty much sums up the Ariel costumes.
That's it? You don't want to talk about them anymore?
Nope. Never want to hear about them again.
Three-thread narrow. Three-thread narrow.
Hey, Maxilux stretch.
And actually, I did use Maxilux stretch.
All right.
Only because I don't think I needed the stretch so much as I wanted the comfort.
Yeah, real close fitting garments.
I wanted the softness of it.
Okay, well, if you have questions, and I think this might be our last costume episode for a while now.
Well, maybe not.
Got other things to talk about. If you have questions, you can get to us. We're on Instagram at SoHere, SoHere.com. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/SoHere.com. And you can always email me at Mallory@SoHere.com. Take it away, Mom.
So long and so happy.
Thanks for listening to Sewing Out Loud. For even more expert sewing advice, visit SewHere.com.